you all so much for joining us on our very first Foster Youth in Action webinar. It's our first of many monthly webinars. As many of you know, we're having two different kinds of webinars. One is on hot topics, and today is definitely a hot topic. Next month, we're going to be doing nuts and bolts, which is more about practical stuff to support youth-led groups to take action in their states and in their communities. Today we're really excited to have this webinar and do it in collaboration with Foster Club and the National Foster Youth and Alumni Policy Council, who has done a lot of work in the area that we're going to be focusing on. And so we're really grateful that they were able to join us. So thank you all so much for coming. I want to quickly introduce all of our presenters. We've got a lot of great presenters. And when I introduce folks, if they can say hello and just wave. And hey, before I do that, Terry, I just got a couple of text messages from Ruth, who says she can't get on. Do you mind helping her out?
Sure, I can try. She might be at home, though. I'm at the office.
Okay. All right, I think she's a little technologically challenged about this one. Okay, so.
I think so.
All right, we'll make fun of her later. So we've got three presenters from Foster Youth in Action. Myself, my name's Matt Rosen, and then we've got Christina and Jayette. Can you guys quickly say hello?
Hey, this is Jayette.
Hey, this is Christina.
Great. We also have a presenter from Foster Club, Alex. Can you say hello, Alex?
Hello, it's Alex.
We also have Danny and Diego from the National Foster Youth and Alumni Policy Council.
Hello, this is Diego.
I don't think Danae is here, but actually, Courtney might be on the line too. She's actually also a member of the Policy Council.
Great.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Courtney.
Hey.
We all know Courtney. And then we have a fourth group, a fourth organization who's presented, Jennifer Rodriguez from the Youth Law Center. Jennifer will be joining us at 5 to talk about a last piece, but isn't going to be able to join us until about then. So before we get into the purpose and a quick icebreaker, one thing that we want to do is if you're not speaking and just listening, if you could go on mute, because there's a lot of background noise right now, and it's really hard for folks to speak. So it's hard to get into it, but just practice that, and so that we can make sure that we're all participating and hearing what we've got going on. So we're here to learn about the Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act of 2014. And in particular, learn more about what we can do to support implementation in our states. So the purpose of the webinar is really to help us break it down, understand what this law means, and then figure out how we can ensure that some of these really important parts of the law actually happen so they can make a difference for young people in care in our states. And so we're going to be talking about rules, and we're going to be talking about regulations. And so I want to ask you all to quickly go around as quickly as we can and say your name, your group, a role in your group, and then one rule you never follow. One rule you never follow, okay? And I'm going to start. So again, my name is Matt Rosen. I'm with Foster Youth in Action. I'm the executive director here at Foster Youth in Action. And in our house, the rule is that when you walk in the door, when you take off your coat, you put it on the hanger and you put it in the closet. And I enforce that rule with my kids, and I tell them, I yell at them to put them on. But you know what? I never follow that rule myself. And I always people are always yelling at me, Matt, your jacket's on the floor, or it's on the couch, or it's in the living room. So that's one rule that I never follow. So why don't we quickly do a go around your name, your group, a role in your group, and one rule you never follow. And I'm looking at you, Christina, because I can see you on the left. Maybe you can start, and then we'll just popcorn around.
Okay. Okay. So my name is Christina. Like Matt said, I'm with Foster Youth in Action, and I do research and resource development. So I help write curriculum, I help write handouts, and all the information that gets distributed to you guys around the training work. Not all of it, but that is my focus. And then one rule I never follow, I don't like to wait for the light to change to say walk. So I often walk against the light if no cars are going to run me over.
All right.
I do stop, though, if there's a car coming. So never not quite accurate.
All right. Hey, Rocky Mountain Children's Center. Oh, go ahead. Whoever's about to talk.
It's me, Jayette.
Hey,
This is Jayette, also with Foster Youth in Action. I'm one of the trainers, mainly working with the states more on the East Coast and stuff like that. One rule I never follow is don't use your cell phones during like workshops and trainings. I never follow that. I'm usually texting, checking on my family, or responding to certain emails and things like that. So yeah, I never follow that rule. So don't hold it against me, please, though.
All right.
I told them it's important.
Hey, how about Rocky Mountain Children's Center? Children's Law Center.
My name is Will. I'm part of Rocky Mountain or Children's Law Center. My role in my group would probably be representative, youth representative. And then one rule I never follow is I ride bikes in like urban areas, so like traffic laws kind of don't apply. So yeah.
Don't apply.
Yeah.
I'm Lizzie Brophy. I am the program coordinator for the Rocky Mountain Children's Law Center with the Emancipating Youth Program, and then a couple other programs as well. One rule I never follow, I don't actually read the terms and conditions when I say I do.
Oh. All right. Hey, Shaquita, how about you? Or let's go to Destiny. Destiny, can you introduce yourself? You got to get off mute, though.
Sorry, I always forget. I'm Destiny from Heroes. I'm a youth leader. And a rule I never follow is at school you have to write down your problems and they do all the work, and I never do it. I just write down the answer.
All right. Kate, how about you?
Hello, this is Diego from the National Policy Council for Region 8, and also do a lot of advocacy work here in Colorado. And one rule I do not follow, and I try to follow, is I try to fall asleep before midnight, but it never really works out. I'm usually up till 1 or 2 reading or just throwing up ideas and stuff.
All right. Thanks, Diego. Anybody else? Kate?
My name is Ness, and I'm calling from CYC SF chapter. And the rule that I never follow is I always like touching something that says "do not touch." I don't know why.
I love that. Good one. Good one. All right. Anybody else want to go?
Well, this is Clary. I'm from Iowa. Oh.
Let's have Iowa first. Go ahead, Iowa.
Okay. My name is Terry. I'm from Iowa. I'm with AMP, which stands for Achieving Maximum Potential, and we are the Foster Care Youth Council here in Iowa. My role is that I have a lot of roles. I am facilitator for two of the largest councils in Ames and Des Moines. I'm also the assistant coordinator, and I'm the one that's kind of the keeper of the stuff. I make all the flyers. I keep all the agendas and things that we need to have. So my one rule that I don't follow is I text while I drive. I don't like spell it out, but I say it into my phone, so it's a little easier. But I'm always in the car, so I'm texting while I'm driving.
All right. Thanks for admitting that. That's bold.
Yeah. Yeah, it is against the law. If I ever get caught, I'll have a fine to pay.
Matt, this is Ruth Buckleton. I'm also with Iowa, and I'm the AMP statewide coordinator, and I wear many hats. And let's see, a rule that I don't follow: speed limits. I think they're overrated.
I think they're overrated, huh? All right. Hey, Joy, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Joy. I'm from California Youth Connection, and I'm a Santa Cruz chapter member. And a rule that I never follow is I always eat cookie dough when you're not supposed to before you stick it in the oven.
Hey, Kanisha, do you want to introduce yourself?
So, hi, I'm Kanisha. I'm from Florida Youth Shine. I'm the statewide legislative chair. And a rule that I don't follow is my coordinator always tell us to leave our complaints at home, but I always come with complaints about not eating the food that she brings.
Good one. All right. Hey, Courtney, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Courtney, and I'm with the Policy Council. And a rule that I do not follow is I'm instructed to eat lunch, and I normally don't.
All right. Hey, we've got a couple of other people. It's time to pipe in. Let's hear a real quick intro so we can move on.
Hey, this is Erin Shea McCann, and I'm from the Mockingbird Society up in Seattle. I'm the Public Policy and Communications Manager. And the rule that I never follow is I pass on the right when driving, but that's primarily because people sit in the left lane, which they're not supposed to do. So it's efficiency.
Yeah.
This is Kate from California Youth Connection. I'm the Bay Area Regional Coordinator, and I'm realizing in the course of this call how many rules I actually don't follow because I've heard several of them I don't follow. And the one I would add to that is I don't wear my bike helmet when I bike.
Hey, this is Jenny calling from California Youth Connection. I'm Director of Programs for California, and part of the rules that we do, my house was when we were little, was children are not to be seen or heard, so unfortunately I break that all the time, and so do my children.
Yeah. I think we might have one or two others. Alex, and then Jory.
Hi, my name is Jory. I'm from Florida Youth Shine. I'm the Florida Youth Shine coordinator. And the rule that I always break is I take my dog a lot of places. So if there's a sign on the door that says in stores that say no dogs allowed, my dog still comes with me.
Hey, oh, Alex, I'm realizing we also have not heard from Shaquita. Shaquita, are you still there? Can you get on the mic? Might not be able to get her. Okay, last person.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, it's weird because I have the phone on and I have the computer on, so it's kind of weird. Shaquita from Georgia Empowerment. My role in the group is I'm the policy and youth specialist. And one rule that I don't follow, which everybody mentioned, is the driving, texting, and speeding, and all of that.
Okay. All right. Well, Alex, I want you to introduce yourself, and then we're going to move on. Well, I have not. I don't know if he's there. Alex, come in, Alex. Earth Alex. There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess you didn't hear any of that. I'm Alex McFarland, and I'm from Foster Club. I'm a policy coordinator here, and rule that I never follow is eating breakfast. I just don't like to really eat breakfast. I'm not hungry. I prefer coffee or tea. So.
All right. Thanks, Alex. So, folks, in September 29th, 2014, President Obama signed an important new piece of legislation. And that piece of legislation has a lot of rules and a lot of regulations and a lot of things that are really important. But as we know now, it's one thing to have a rule, and it's another thing to follow it. So part of what we can do as folks working to make changes in their states and in their communities is to really think not just about creating rules, but also making sure that those rules are implemented, that those rules are in effect, that they actually work for the people that they were meant to serve. And so that's sort of the way for us to move into the next part of our workshop, which is really to make sure that we understand what's about this important new piece of legislation. So today we're going to talk about 3 or 4 parts of this new federal law, and we're going to have a conversation about how to start getting states to implement the law, particularly the pieces that we care most about. I'm going to go ahead and let Alex sort of tell us a little bit about the intent of the law and then the story of the law.
Yeah, so some of you know that a legislative process is quite a process, and so the law was signed into effect on September 29th, this in 2014. But prior to that, there was actually a lot of different suggestions for what could happen, and so there was actually about 6 or 7 different sex trafficking bills that existed within the Senate and the House Representatives. And so leaders kind of came together from both parties and both the House and the Senate and decided instead to craft one piece of legislation that would include most of these provisions. And so unfortunately, some pieces got kicked out and some pieces stayed in. And even prior to that, a lot of those different pieces of legislation came directly from Youth Voice. And so one of the great things about that was this had been going on for a year prior to a lot of this legislation happening. And so there's a lot of different organizations, a lot of individual youth advisory boards that had been to Washington, D.C. and met with different leaders, specifically within the Senate Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Committee controls all of the money that goes that is allocated to bills. And so anytime it comes up and there is money involved, they get involved. And so they had heard about a lot of the different concerns from foster youth and decided to make legislation about this. And so we have a lot of allies within the Senate and within the House of Representatives. And the National Policy Council was able to be involved in that discussion simply because they got a hold of our recommendations that we had made to the Administration for Children and Families about how to reduce sex trafficking and improve foster care. So I don't know if we want to go into the slide that has all the so there were several different intents with the law, and so a lot of the conversation about child welfare for such a long time has been addressing problems after they happen. And so with sex trafficking, we have a lot of new laws in place which address for preventing sex trafficking, the after effects basically. And so it doesn't really prevent it. And so like one of the big ones is that a lot of times, especially in California, youth who are picked up for sex trafficking are considered prostitutes, even if they're below the age of consent. And so that was a huge piece that needed to be changed. And that was actually changed already, but the problem was it doesn't reduce sex trafficking. And so when the Policy Council started to hear about sex trafficking, all that we could think about from a youth perspective was the foster care system somehow makes youth vulnerable to predators. What is that thing that makes a foster vulnerable? I don't know that we've necessarily found exactly what it is, but the Policy Council made several different recommendations, and a whole set of recommendations called Reducing Vulnerability to Sex Trafficking and Predators in Foster Care. And so we, in our discussions with leaders in the Children's Bureau, we wanted to shift the conversation towards vulnerability, because we believe that making all these laws and policies to try to help kids after they've been trafficked isn't enough, and it doesn't really get to the point of the issue. It's not that we need to save children from sex trafficking, it's that we need to empower them as young adults. We need to empower them to be able to recognize the relationships they have. And so we wanted to also make sure that when kids get into a situation where they could become victims of sex trafficking, that there is certain ways that the system can respond to them in a way that is more youth friendly. And so we talked about that as well. And then lastly was really to elevate youth voice. One of the great things about this law is the fact that from the process, from beginning to end, it's really incorporated youth voice and still continues to incorporate youth voice for implementation at the Children's Bureau. And so, yeah, I don't know if we want to, do you want to talk about that, Matt, or the?
Well, I think, Alex, you did a great job of describing the intent of the law. There are some important pieces in the law that we're going to talk about. Alex talked about the piece around protecting children and youth who are victims or at risk of sex trafficking. But there are other pieces too. One is supporting normalcy for youth in care, which lots of groups here either are thinking about it or working on their own advocacy in their own states. A third piece is getting documents like Social Security cards, driver's licenses, birth certificates, and other really important documents before they exit care. And then also making sure that young people know their rights. There are other pieces in this section too, but we're highlighting these four because they're the ones that we have seen many youth-led groups really focus on in their own. So I want to quickly, before we go into some of the details, I want to go back to one quick thing. And I just wanted to say that we're going to be talking about things that that people may feel uncomfortable about, that where there's sensitive subject matter ahead. Using the term sex trafficking may even make people feel uncomfortable. And it's really hard to create a safe space on this webinar. And so I guess I wanted to just say one thing is that if you feel uncomfortable or if something feels hurtful, and if you feel like you want to share, that you say ouch, so at least we know that might feel hurtful and then we can address that. So we're trying to use terms and language that are in the law itself. Sex trafficking is the phrase that's used, but that might feel uncomfortable to some people. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge that this might be difficult, that it is difficult to create a safe space on a webinar, and that if you do feel like you want to share something about feeling uncomfortable, say ouch and let us know so that we can address that. So let's go ahead and go back to the key things. So we passed the law. The law was passed in 2014. And you know, are we done? What are we going to do? What should we just sort of sit back and chill out? And I think that what we're going to really talk about over the next hour is that we're not done, and that there's lots of work to do. That elected officials have passed the law. Each state is responsible for implementing the law. Each state needs to ensure that these important things that we've just talked about, youth rights, normalcy, preventing sex trafficking, ensuring young people have documents, is the responsibility of the states to ensure. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for youth groups organizing in their states? Well, I think it means a lot for what we can do. So Alex, I'm going to let you go into the next section to talk a little bit more about sort of the definitions of sex trafficking and section.
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of define sex trafficking so that we could all kind of understand it, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what sex trafficking is. And so it's defined as a person who is recruited, transported, provided for, or obtained for the purpose of a commercial sex act. And so that's a very broad definition. And so I want to make sure that we understand that. I think a lot of times when people think about sex trafficking, they think that it means a kid is getting picked up outside of a homeless shelter or a group home and thrown in the back of a bus and taken off to Utah or whatnot. And that really, it's a lot deeper than that. And there's a lot that goes into this law that when we talked to youth, that they really didn't understand what sex trafficking is. And we even had a recent meeting when we talked to Children's Bureau, when we explained sex trafficking to the different youth in the room who were experienced, educated advocates. They were really surprised in their own experience how different forms of sexual exploitation and commercial sexual exploitation was in their foster care experience that they really never realized before. And so, like Matt was saying, this definitely can be a topic that's sensitive for some people because they kind of remember different aspects in their life that may have been related to sex trafficking that we really didn't think about in a certain way, because for such a long time, sex trafficking had a very narrow definition. And so when we talk about why we want to address sex trafficking, there's a lot of different reasons. And so one of the big things that we realized in the Policy Council and then talking to youth was that youth from foster care experience more vulnerability. And what we mean by vulnerability is not that every single youth has the potential to be victimized, because all youth and anyone has the potential to be victimized, but that foster youth are in a higher foster youth are in commercial sex trafficking and sexual exploitation at a higher rate than the normal population. And what that means is that there's something about the foster care system, not the individuals going into it. And so what that means is that there's a lot of those populations are transient. They don't have, a stable address. They have few adult connections, a lack of resources, and may have already experienced abuse. And so a lot of times, without seeing an appropriate relationship model for them, they may engage in a relationship that is unhealthy without even knowing it. And it's one of the things at Foster Club we realized a long time ago, that our youth that were coming into our All-Star internship were having a huge problem. And they kind of told us that, we don't understand what it means to really have a healthy relationship. And for a long time, foster care has really never focused on what it means to have a healthy relationship. And if no adult's coming and looking for you, you're at a higher risk to be victimized. And one of the other big things is that sometimes the alternative that the sex trafficking predators, or Johns as they call them, will bring is that their alternative is better than foster care. A lot of times these these people, I actually went to a training once, and they showed us a video that they trained the Johns with, and it focused on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what that means is that there's things that a person needs to basically function as a person. The first thing in the bottom is housing. And so a lot of times these predators would come to young adults who are leaving group homes, who are leaving foster care, and that never begins as a sex trafficking situation. It begins as a, hey, do you want to go to McDonald's? Hey, do you need a place to stay for the night? And it's very simple to get caught up in that without even knowing it, no matter who you are. And so within the bill, there's several different sex trafficking provisions. And so the first is that states are going to be required to collect and report data and determine services for victims of sex trafficking or at risk. And so what that means is that it really could mean a lot of things, and it's going to be up to you guys to help define what does it mean to be at risk for sex trafficking. Do we say that every kid in foster care is at risk? Do we say that only women are at risk? Do we say that only kids 12 and older are at risk? I don't really think that any of these specific things are going to be the answer, and I think it's going to be a lot when we talk about what that implementation means. It's going to be up to you guys to define what you believe is at risk, and also what happens when you're a youth at risk. Does it mean that every kid should go through sex traffic training and a lot of times when youth run away from care, they're at a higher risk for sex trafficking. And so this part also says that if kids run away from care and they come back, maybe they have to have an assessment or a questionnaire to ask them about if they had experiences that might relate to sex trafficking. It also says that they have to inform law enforcement within 24 hours of receiving info about any youth who has been ID'd as a victim. And lastly, that states are going to be required to create and carry out plans to locate youth missing from care. Surprisingly, there's not a lot of strict reporting requirements for when youth leave foster care and come back. Sometimes states will file missing persons reports, sometimes they won't. It really depends up to the state. And so this is definitely an area where you guys are going to have a whole lot of say in what that looks like in your own state, because the federal law exists, but this part of the federal law is very vague. And I think it's going to be very easy for a lot of other organizations and a lot of other voices to get heard in this conversation, when you guys is very, really important, I believe.
I'm sorry, Alex, were you going to say something before I moved on?
No, I didn't know if we wanted to reach out to the policy council members now to talk about the importance, or we were going to...
Yeah, let's do that. I'm sorry, yeah. I skipped over.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. And so I didn't know if Danae wanted to speak about why these provisions are important to her.
Yeah, I would actually love to discuss this.
Hey, Danae.
Hello, how is everybody? So the reason why sex trafficking is a big deal in my story, in my situation, is because when I was 15, I entered foster care, and I was in a traditional foster home. And at the time, vulnerability was a major problem with me, and, love and everything about building a connection and a trustable bond with someone was very important to me. So I came across this older man. He was maybe in his mid-20s, and I was 15. And he just sat down, he listened. It wasn't like anybody, came kidnap me or anything. It was just like a regular guy that, I met on the corner of a street or, walking down the street. Just stopped me and started talking to me, and then I started telling him my story. So as I'm telling him my story and everything, he started to listen. He started to respond and said, "Oh, I'm sorry that you had to go through all this." He felt bad, gave me a hug and everything. So I thought that was a trustful adult that I can, put my trust in. And later on down the line, eventually it involved me having unwanted sexual relations with this man. and at gunpoint. And during that time, I didn't know what to do. I was scared, frightened, and everything. And then I ended up being pregnant from it. So let me remind you, like sex trafficking, most people look at it as like kidnapping, you know, and international trade and everything, and it's something that's not. It's more of like you can meet someone off the street, a stranger, a complete stranger, off the street at a bus stop, at school, you know, on your way to the grocery store. You just meet all these random people, and someone that just shows you know the niceness and you know the kind-hearted that they have. They give the youth the time of the day. You know, we take that as foster youth. We want that love, we want that attention, we want that affection. So we give in and we take that. And so in my situation, that's what happened. So I ended up, you know, talking and everything, and that's what happened after a while. And it was more not so, it didn't have anything to do with really trading anything, because I had to go out, I had to steal for him, you know, I had to go to grocery stores and steal stuff for him and everything, and like take people's, you know, cell phones to give it to him and have him do everything. And it wasn't something that I was used to or didn't know anything about it, but because he threatened me to cut himself off and to not talk to me if I didn't do anything like that for him, then, you know, I would go out there and do it. That was the only person that, you know, showed me that affection and love that I never got from my biological mother before I entered care. So I did all these bad, illegal things that could have landed me in jail, that could have landed me with prison time, all of that. And I feel that at-risk youth is basically everyone that's in foster care, because it can just happen. Like, it can be a trustworthy adult that a youth can put their trust in, and that can happen. As if, like, I trusted this person, and they used that from me. And I didn't know what was going on. You know, I just thought I was doing the right thing. He would stay with me and all that. But when you get the bigger picture, and now that I'm older and I see that, hey, sex trafficking, that's something that I was involved in, and now I see like the bigger picture that it can happen to anyone without them really knowing.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So that's just one example, I think, of a lot of different examples that we've heard about that really kind of hit home to what it means to really need to understand this better, and to really hear from youth about what it means to be a victim of sex trafficking, but also to be a part of the process and making that not only happen, but to prepare youth if in case it does. So.
And this is Diego, and I just wanted to add something. I mean, in the state of Colorado recently, there was sex trafficking at a family stock show. 6 youth were actually being caught while they're about to get ready to transition them. So it could happen anywhere in a family setting. So just keeping in mind of like being socially aware of what's going on.
Thanks, Diego. So Alex, just try to pay attention to our time and the big agenda that we've taken on for ourselves. So maybe we can say a little bit about sort of next steps, and then we'll go on to rights.
Yeah, sure. So basically where we're at now is that, so states, this reporting system that they talk about, it must be in place within a year of the bill's signing. So that's on the 29th of this year, really. And right now, they're really looking at recommendations for action. And so the Children's Bureau, when a law is passed, it goes to them to interpret the law. And so right now they're making an opinion to send out to states to get these things in place. And so your guys' advocacy is going to be really important, because every state is going to have to develop in their own plans and in their own laws what this looks like. And so this is a prime time to get involved with the people in charge, so that your voice can be heard on this. And so the Policy Council actually has a couple different recommendations. Just in the sake of time, I don't think we'll go over all of them, but we can forward them to everyone after this webinar.
And one of the things we'll do, Alex, is we'll update the fact sheet that we shared to people in advance, and include some of those specific implementation recommendations, so that people have some things that they might want to do now that they know a little bit more about the law.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and talk about youth rights, which is in the bill itself, it's pretty small. but it's very important to young people and a significant part of this legislation. So why don't we start with I think I skipped a piece. Now let's just say a little bit more about the actual youth rights components in the legislation. Alex, if you want to say a little bit about that.
So, so in the legislation, what all it really says is a very small part of the bill, and it says that states must provide a written list of rights to youth 14 and up, and it must be reviewed at their case plans case plan reviews every 6 months, and those rights have to include like health and education and how to access their records, and so. Unfortunately, it's a very small part of the bill, and everything that I've seen in the advocacy community so far, everyone is really skipping over it. And but the youth and everything I've heard from the youth are saying like, no, this is one of the most important parts of the legislation. And so as of now, I believe a little over half of the states in the U.S. Have a Bill of Rights for foster youth. And so what that means is that there are some states that have none at all, but there's also, even in those states that have youth rights, there is no enforcement policies at all. Those rights are very different for each and every state. Oregon is the only state that has youth rights specifically for GLBTQ populations. And so as implementation occurs, what we've said to the Children's Bureau is that it's imperative that not only are youth involved in the discussion and the development of these rights, but also that they are really expanded upon rather than these very small areas. That states should make a comprehensive use of rights and make a grievance procedures that youth can know that they have rights and then act upon that, because there's no point in knowing you have rights if there's no enforcement policies at all.
So Alex, I would ask Christina to say a bit about some of the work that we have done around Foster Youth in Action has done around youth rights, because she has taken a close look at some of the rights legislation that young people have organized and passed, or other legislation that other states have passed. So Christina, could you say a little bit about some of the things that we have learned around youth rights?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the summer of 2014 and the fall of 2014, we did a lot of research looking at which states have foster youth rights that are easily accessible. And what it came down to, based on internet research and reaching out to different states and their Department of Social Services, is that, like Alex said, about half of the states have easily accessible rights. But they come in two different forms. So one is that states have passed legislation saying that this is the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. All of the rights are compiled in one section of law, and they're easily accessible. And only 12 states have done that. So that they say this is the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, and it gets translated to a poster or a flyer or something like that that's easily distributed. And it's in legislation as a Bill of Rights. Kind of like the Bill of Rights that's part of our US Constitution, right? It is the core of what our rights are. 19 other states have compiled rights so that they say, okay, these are the rights that youth have in our state, and we're gonna put them all in one document, but they're not an official Bill of Rights. Some of those are distributed as a Bill of Rights in itself. A couple of them are part of a handbook that youth get when they enter care. And one of them actually is only found in the foster parents handbook. So it's not actually directly given to young people, it's given to foster parents when they receive training. So that leaves about 19 states that don't have easily accessible rights. So there are rights for foster youth in every state, but as we know, not every young person has access to that information, and that information is incredibly important to making sure that young people get what they need. So part of this legislation is making sure that young people have access to the rights and that they're explained in ways that make sense to them. And part of what's really important about this is that even if you have all the rights in the world, if you don't know about them, and if they're not in language that is easily understood, they're not very useful, really, when it comes down to making sure your own needs are being met in self-advocacy. So that on our website, you can see all of the information about which states have a Bill of Rights and which states have compiled rights. And it's going to be important to think about sort of how you want to get involved in this process. So like Alex said, the Children's Bureau is going to be, compiling tips for states on these things. And it's up to the state to figure out what to include in those rights if they don't already have them and how to distribute them. So it's a great opportunity for all of you to get involved in making sure that the rights that are important are included and that they're effectively distributed. So making sure that there are more than one way for young people to access them and that they make sense to young people. And I think that later on, Jennifer Rodriguez is going to talk about some of the how to make it happen in your state and some big lessons. So I think that that's really important. And I guess what I will leave to her to talk about, but I will say that this is one of the areas in which partnering with your state and the Department of Social Services and other organizations that are already working on this is going to be really important, because hopefully your states are starting to talk about it if they haven't already made significant progress. And so the numbers that I give you may have changed even in the last few months as the state, as this legislation starts to be talked about, and we'll continue to update this effort. Yeah. Do you want me to say anything, Matt, about California process, or you want to leave it to Jennifer?
Jennifer will focus on that. But
Okay, great. Yeah.
So, Alex, just in the interest of time, maybe we can have alumni, Foster Youth Alumni Policy Council talk a little bit about some of their recommendations for implementation of youth rights. I know they've been thinking about that.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about that, Diego?
Yeah, so when it comes to, prudent parenting, and what I mean by prudent parenting is being able to
hey, Diego, let's talk specifically about youth rights, and then we're going to get to prudent parenting.
Yeah.
You are? Okay.
Yeah. Let's just talk about how to ensure that we can implement the youth rights piece at this point. Do you have any recommendations about that?
Yeah, well, at least for what I'm doing in Colorado is keeping all the youth advisory boards collaborating with each other and keeping consistent communication when it comes to what should we have it in, like congregate care in the group homes. Is it something that is showable, or is it something that is handed as soon as you enter care? Right now, it's not shown anywhere in the house, or the youth does not receive it right away. It's something that you have to ask your caseworker, and the caseworker has to get it and then give it on to the foster child. So, but that's about it.
Courtney, did you have anything about youth rights at all?
Yes. So that we discussed in the Policy Council regarding youth rights, one of our recommendations is that youth must receive their rights within 72 hours during the foster care system. And also maybe having a youth sign an acknowledgement of a receipt that they understand their rights of being in the foster care system, and also when they're switching from different placements, that they have a receipt that they understand their rights when they're at a different placement. Because depending if you're in congregate care or a foster home or a RTC, maybe it'll be a little different depending on your rights. And so that's another recommendation that we said, maybe them having receipts. And also states should be required to post these rights, everywhere, like you're saying, not in a handbook, but making it readily accessible to you in different ways. So those are a couple of recommendations that we have regarding rights.
I want to put it out to the group. So many of you all have been thinking a lot about this and fighting for your rights for years. What other things do we need to think about to make sure that states are prepared to ensure that you know about these rights? What other things do you want to add so that we can get it out there? I'm going back to Florida, to Massachusetts, to California. If you guys have some suggestions or ideas, what things should we be thinking about around rights?
Does anybody want to add on? But I just want to go ahead and say, having collaborative effort, like talking, having discussions about this, and how do we pass on information between other states? Because most of the time, I think we have our own initiatives, but when we bring it together, I think it's more empowering to youth and young adults in care.
All right, thanks. So if y'all have other ideas about how to
Matt, we actually asked for group homes to post the Foster Care Bill of Rights in each of the homes.
Thanks, Jenny. Any other recommendations, things that will really, that states really could benefit from knowing to ensure that youth know about the rights?
Can I add on to what Jenny just said? Hello? I know my group home posted the Bill of Rights, but they posted it in the kitchen, and some of the kids are not allowed to cook. So sometimes the kids wouldn't even know what their rights were because it was in the kitchen where it was forbidden for certain foster youth. So if some counties can change their location of where they're putting the bill, would be lovely.
So it might be really important to be specific about where these rights are posted.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Any other specific recommendations that we'll want to make to the states about implementation of these rights before we move on to normalcy?
Well, I know in Iowa. Oh.
Hold on. I think Destiny, were you about to say something?
She can go first, and then I'll go.
Okay, so Ruth, and then Destiny, and then we'll go on to normalcy. Who is not a person.
Okay, this is Terry. Yeah, this is Terry in Iowa. What we did in Iowa were the Bill of Rights are posted in the social service agencies as well as at the Department of Human Services, the state services. They were posted in group care, shelter facilities, just about anywhere youth would be.
Thanks, Terry. What were you suggesting? Destiny, tell us what you were thinking.
In Massachusetts, social workers, they take longer to do things here, or they just don't do it. Like they know it and they just don't put it. So to make sure they do it, like have like teams that know about it, have them like be like, you guys need to do this, or you guys need to put this in the houses or in the group homes or stuff like that. The teens or the foster youth that do know about the rights. Because like in Massachusetts, there's laws that were made last year that social workers don't do when they're supposed to.
So engaging young people and helping to educate social workers about these rights and how to have these social workers educate others. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, well, let's talk about, let's go on to another important provision of the law, which is normalcy.
Hey, Matt, it's me, Neff. I was just wondering, is there any way that the youth can also sign the Bill of Rights when they get into care, depending on their age, just so they can also understand and know, hey, I know my rights and I agreed to follow by this. And if there's like any miscommunication, a social worker or an ombudsman can help them, like, figure out what every right means. I was sorry if I chimed in late.
No, it sounds like you're making a really strong recommendation that young people have to sign something to make sure that they know their rights.
And
yeah, because in California, we in a group home, they give you a certain amount of rights. Well, they have a list, and it's not, I can't remember off the top of my head. However, it's kind of like their like their commitment to you and your commitment to them. So I'm thinking if they're having us sign a paper about us committing, how about we sign a paper knowing our rights and advocating for ourselves?
Thank you for sharing that. We're writing that down, but I feel like, Nez, there was another recommendation in there. You used the term ombudsman. So maybe say a little bit more about that.
In California, we do have an ombudsman, and I don't know if all states do, but that would be great, something that people can have. And they're mainly, the ombudsman is a foster care ombudsman that just, reminds their youth of what they're doing and their rights and stuff.
And that's actually something that many states don't have. Only a few do, unfortunately.
Right. I believe that Oregon has an ombudsman. It sounds like California does, but there are many other states that don't.
And I think this is someone from Washington. We have one, but they serve kind of a different role. They take general citizen complaints about child welfare and child protective services. So they don't necessarily just focus on one population. So.
Thank you. Well, because we have we only have a half hour left and some ground to cover, I'd like us to turn to another important part of the legislation, and that is normalcy. And so, Alex, I'll turn this back to you.
Yeah, so a lot of you have heard about normalcy, especially the folks in Florida who kind of pioneered a lot of this with Florida Youth Shine, and so what it really means is that youth in foster care should have the ability to engage in the same types of experiences that they were able to engage in when they were not in foster care. If that can mean a whole lot of. And for the bill has some requirements, but it doesn't really cover everything. But just for normalcy, I wanted to say specifically that a lot of things are normal for one group, but not normal for another group. And a lot of times when we are foster youth and we're advocating for different things when it comes to normalcy, a lot of times I think that we sometimes can very easily forget that what is normal for us is not normal for everyone. And one of the issues that have come up that I've seen is that a youth, I'm from Ohio originally, and so in Ohio and in other parts of the South, it's very common to take your kids hunting with you. And so a kid was arguing with his caseworker that he should be able to go hunting with his father, but the child welfare agency said, no, you're not allowed to. You can't handle a gun. That's insane. You're far too young. And it's just kind of, it's just another example of how child welfare agencies don't empower youth to take risks and don't empower youth to be kind of responsible in their own future for even something as simple as driving a car. And so what the bill requires is something called prudent parenting. And so what does prudent parenting mean? Well, they say that they have to have a reasonable and prudent parent standard for foster parents. And that really just means that you should parent your foster children as though they were your own children. But that kind of puts it in a confusing situation, because if you think about it, what if that, this is a very, black and white example, but what if you have a Christian family who believes being gay is a sin and they take in a, GLBTQ youth? Well, in situations that I've heard from youth, they are told they can't be that way. They are told they need to leave. They're told they need to change. And so prudent parenting technically kind of says that they should parent them like they're their own kids. And so what we really want to get across with because as the legislation's written, it insinuates that way. But I think that what your guys' role in this is to communicate across that your experience in care should mimic your experience at home. that the discussion for what it means to make prudent parenting decisions shouldn't necessarily mean that foster parents get free reign to make decisions for you, but that they should make decisions with youth and engage them in the discussion on what it means to kind of take control of their own life and gain independence. And not just, it's not just about extracurricular activities or going to prom. It really kind of is about everything in a foster youth's life. And so I don't know if Courtney, if you wanted to talk a little bit about normalcy and prudent parenting and why some of the recommendations that the council had.
Okay, well, some of the recommendations that we had regarding prudent parenting, you kind of just really spelled it out. Just the youth needs to be involved in developing, their whole planning and decision making in the process of prudent parenting, because we've heard of stories where parents have made decisions and then it negatively impacted, but also we've heard of stories where foster parents wanted to take their kids out of town, but because they weren't able to exercise prudent parenting, that it was very important for them to be able to have that decision making. So you kind of really talk about it, youth being involved. Also, it's not just about the extracurricular activities, but mainly that's what individuals are really wanting is the extracurricular activities, and just making sure that there's a formalized definition of normalcy and understanding what that may look like for your state.
Fantastic. So yeah, there is a lot of different ways that this has been happening, and Florida is a great example of a state that has done a lot with normalcy. And I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about the strides that you guys have made. Maybe.
Sorry, I was trying to take myself off mute. Kanisha, do you want to talk about it? Since you've been one of the youth involved in it.
Accomplishments that we've actually made normalcy. A lot of youth in Florida Youth Shine, they did talk about making their own decisions about extracurricular activities and being able to work around curfews and actually being able to get their license, and the barrier explaining to legislators the barriers that they face by like how they're stopped, how there's like the laws and the rules and regulations that stop them from actually being a normal, feeling like a normal a youth in care. So I mean, like Alex said, it's basically normal is different for everyone. So what you will want for yourself is something that you will have to know how to advocate for to actually feel normal, because what I may want is not something that you may want. But here in Florida, we have actually youth when we go speak to legislators, we explain what normal is to us. So that's how.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think when we happened 2 years ago is when they passed the legislation and they spoke about that. So for the past 2 years, it's just been a huge community education piece. So they've probably done over 50 panels throughout the state just talking about that new legislation and educating the youth, and then also educating those that work with our youth in our state. And then in addition, when there's not normalcy happening, they found a lot in group homes. So they're going into group homes to find out exactly what's not happening and educating them on the new legislation. And then in addition, they took it to the other level, like what Kanisha was saying with driver's licenses, with saying there's still legislation that can be made to help normalcy out. So last year they focused on driver's licenses for kids in care. So a lot of that legislation pieces around that.
Jory, it sounds like, though, that from what I would pull from what you said is that doing this kind of ongoing education where over and over meeting people where they're at, explaining to them what it means, making sure they understand it, not sort of assuming that you do it once and they get it, but to repeat it over and over again. You mentioned 50 panel presentations. It sounds like that was an approach that you thought really made a lot of sense, and that might be something that other people would probably want to do in other states around this piece of normalcy. What do you think about that as a recommendation? And Kenesha, what do you think? Is that something that you would recommend for other states to really use your approach?
I think that panels, community education is very important, because like normalcy is different. It's on a case by case basis. So if youth can talk to and communicate to people their needs and what they want, as simple as getting their hair done. There are female youth that say, like, in group homes and in foster homes, they don't get their hair done, and that's not normal for them, like, not to have their hair done or just look appropriate in different settings. So community education is good, because you get to understand on a case-by-case basis how you can help a youth feel normal. So I think that community education is very important.
This is Courtney. Can I say something?
Please. Thank you, Courtney.
Okay. So one thing that I know, when I was working for the department, they were having a hard time on quality indicators for contract monitoring purposes, and they wanted recommendations on how do you measure if a person is reaching their normalcy within a placement. And so I don't know other states if their departments are having that same issue. It's like, how do you measure normalcy? Maybe I know that was hard for the youth to kind of come up with, like, how do you measure that? But they know that they wanted normal activities. And so I think the department is having a hard time wrapping their mind around, okay, how can I hold the child placement agencies accountable for normalcy if I have to come up with quality indicators? So this is something to put out there.
Right. So really looking at what might be some meaningful and measurable indicators of what normalcy is a recommendation that we might want to make to ensure that normalcy gets implemented.
Hey, this is Ness again. I'm thinking, I had this one idea from our summer conference last year, and it was more about maybe the social worker needs to engage with the youth about what normalcy is, what type of activities do they want to do, what do they want to do in life, what are their goals, what are some things they want to work on. I think that the social worker needs to find out what the youth needs and wants and what do they like to do. And I think that they need to also convey this in child provider places. Maybe child providers can do this. They can have a whole sheet of paper of different organizations and activities in their community that the youth can do and other things that the youth want to work on. So yeah.
Don't think that's enough, but I definitely think it's a good starting point for us to see how well that works and to engage communities, like Kenesha was saying, and understanding that this shouldn't just apply to 16 and up, but this really should apply to everyone. But I did want you guys to know that there is a requirement for youth 16 and older to have that demonstrated to the court.
So we have Jennifer Rodriguez from the Youth Law Center here. Before we did that, I want to make sure if there were any more recommendations for us to get down to capture before we move on around normalcy.
I just wanted to say, like, when you're working with social workers, they have one, I think her name was Danny. She was saying that social workers, they don't do what they supposed to do. So in other states, I know here in Florida, we have attorney ad litem and guardian ad litem to ensure that they speak on behalf of foster youth in the best interest of the foster youth, to ensure that foster youth are actually getting, like, their rights are being followed, they're getting their basic needs, and their normalcy is being met. In other states, do you guys have that? Because I feel that we are all human, and people need supervision over them at times to ensure that things are happening, like people are getting what they need.
Tanisha, we kind of lost you right there.
I was asking, here in Florida, we have guardian ad litems and attorney ad litems who go to court other than your actual social worker, and they speak on your behalf. So if your normalcy is not being met and your social worker isn't doing anything about it, you have your guardian ad litem or your attorney ad litem to speak on your behalf.
It sounds like one recommendation might be to make sure that the guardian ad litems are involved in and know about normalcy, so they can be supportive of that to ensure that that's happening. Is that fair? Is that a way to frame that recommendation?
Yes.
Great. Hey, do we have one recommendation, because we're going to need to move on?
Hey, Matt, want to add one recommendation. When it comes to having congregate care, having two different assessments, because when you're in a group with 4 or 6 other boys, it's a lot more difficult to see normalcy there than somebody that, is living with a foster parent. And so just trying to determine, the differences, what it means to be in congregate care and what it doesn't mean to be in congregate care, and how do you assess those two different things in the well-being inside the home.
So being clear about the differences between the settings that young people are in and approaching normalcy differently. Being clear that there's a different situation. Great, we're getting that too. Okay, so hey, thank you all so much for these great recommendations. I want to introduce Jennifer Rodriguez, the Executive Director of the Youth Law Center. And Jennifer has some important sort of thoughts to share with us about state implementation based on her many years of experience as an organizer and an advocate, and someone who's now in a position to really think nationally about how to improve the child welfare system. So Jennifer, I'll let you go from here, and I'll get you to those slides.
Great. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. So as Matt said, I'm Jennifer. I'm the Executive Director of the Youth Law Center, and what we do is we do advocacy, system advocacy for youth who are in the foster care and the juvenile justice system. And I've been a lawyer at YLC for about 8 years now, but prior to the Youth Law Center, I actually started my advocacy career in the California Youth Connection as a former foster youth who was a member. And the first bill I ever worked on as a youth was both the Foster Care Bill of Rights in California, which was actually 14 years ago, and the SB 933, which created our state foster care ombudsman's office, who is responsible for informing youth about their rights in care and also enforcement of the rights in care. And so I want to talk with you just a little bit about, since we've sort of been going through the process of trying to implement the Foster Youth Bill of Rights for quite some time, going on 2 decades now. I want to talk with you a little bit about what we've learned in that process. And some of these lessons, I think, are specific to the Foster Care Bill of Rights, but many of the lessons are actually just generally about implementation of this entire federal act. So the first lesson that we really learned was about how important it was to partner with our local advocates to figure out what exactly the changes that are needed to state law and policy. So you all heard on this webcast that over half of the states have some sort of Bill of Rights. Whether or not that Bill of Rights is actually in law or in regulation or in case law can be really mysterious. And it's the type of thing that lawyers live to do. So my recommendation to you is to pair up with local friendly advocates. Don't just pick anyone, pick the friendly ones that you believe have the best interests of youth in mind, to look at what you currently have and look at the federal law to figure out, do you actually need changes, and what are those changes? I can tell you that back when I was with CYC, we actually created the Foster Youth Bill of Rights back in 1999 here in California with the Youth Law Center. They walked us through the entire code, looking at the education code, at the health code, at the welfare and institutions code here, to put together the Bill of Rights, and kind of became our shadow advisors as we moved the bill through the process. And it was really, really helpful to have that legal expertise while we moved forward the policy that we wanted to move forward. So that was really the first lesson. The second lesson is that I would encourage you all to use this pressure on your state to have to implement some sort of provisions around foster youth rights. Use it to create what the policy you want. Do not limit yourself to thinking that, okay, well, what the federal statute says is that youth have to be informed and they have to sign it. Think about in a scenario where youth really understood what their rights were and where those rights were able to be enforced, what would that look like? And then just use the federal law as a springboard, as sort of the reason, well, we have to do this anyway, so we might as well do it right. So don't be limited. Think creatively and expansively. And it sounds like many of you already are. And I'd really encourage you to use the other states that are part of the network to think that through. The third lesson, and I'll tell you if there's anything that I feel like is the biggest lesson, it's this last one. You have to consider enforcing the youth rights and how to hold people accountable for following the rights and giving youth the information right now, like as you're developing whatever changes are necessary to your state law and policy. What we have found out by and large in California is that without our foster care ombudsman's office there to, so let me back up and say our state law says that social workers have to educate every single youth who's in foster care in an age-appropriate and a developmentally appropriate way about what their rights are, and they have to do that yearly. And the rights have to be posted in any facility that has 6 or more children in them, which is fine, except that we, realized pretty quickly that what was going to happen was that wasn't going to happen. Just like, you all mentioned, sometimes workers get overwhelmed. They're not necessarily following the law. You simply were not getting the information that they needed. And so we made our state foster care ombudsman's office. And I will say our ombudsman's office is unusual because it was also created by the youth in CYC. So the focus is actually on foster youth, which I think makes us unique among all of the states. And their primary purpose is actually to educate youth about what their rights are, and then they have authority under our law to go into any foster home or any facility to investigate a complaint regarding foster youth rights. And we also had them set up a toll-free line and made sure that their office had staff people who were former foster youth, so created state civil service positions that are actually former foster youth positions, where the youth are part of doing the intake from the complaints that come in from youth, and also investigating the complaints and interviewing the youth and doing presentations. We felt like that was really important so that youth knew this is an office that's actually going to listen to you. I would say without that office, honestly, the Bill of Rights would just be like something that would be nice to talk about and to pat ourselves on the back for, but that we wouldn't actually be able to step in and intervene when a youth isn't, being respected or not having their visitation. So you might come up with another method for enforcement or accountability, but I would really encourage you to think about that from the outset and build it into whatever your law or policy changes. Another important lesson for us was to make sure that you get the state level leadership buy-in. Sometimes what happens when a federal law passes and a state enacts, they don't really take it seriously. They just sort of change their state plan to the feds to make an assurance to say, yeah, sure, we're going to do that. But because the state didn't engage in a policy conversation about why this was necessary, they don't feel it. And in order for people to really make the policy changes, they have to feel why it's important to youth. So I'd really encourage all of the youth leaders in the state to go meet with your state level leadership, to explain to them why the provisions of this act are so important, to tell them what you want and why you want it, so that they take some ownership of this, and they don't feel like we're doing this because the federal government is making us do it. Instead, they'll feel like we're doing this because this is a real issue for youth, and it's important and the right thing to do for us. So really getting them to take ownership. Another piece, another learning lesson is to make sure that you first, just like you're doing on this call, look out there to see what all the best practices are, and then build those best practices into both your state policy and law, but then also in your implementation. So look through all of the material that Matt has available about what the different state bills of rights are. You know, as an organization, go through and see which ones do you like, which ones do you not like, merge, put them together, see what's out there, and you really use that to shape your policy. And then the last thing I'll say is that here in California, even though we're almost 2 decades out from having a Foster Youth Bill of Rights, we still have to train every single year. We have to train our attorneys, our guardian ad litem, our CASAs, our social workers, our court staff, our foster parents, our group homes. We have to constantly train on the youth rights for people to remember that they exist, and to also help them understand at a very practical level, when something comes up, how does it actually end up being influenced by the rights. So those are sort of my top line recommendations to you about what we've learned, I think, here in California around state level implementation. I'd be happy to answer questions if anybody has them. I know we're running close on time.
Let's get at least one question,
Okay.
if there's available. I know that, Jennifer, you need to run too.
No, I'm okay. As long as I'm out of here by 5:45, I'm probably good.
Okay. Does anybody have a question for Jennifer, or a comment, or something that they heard that was cool and that they want to do because of what she said?
I'm sorry, Jennifer, where do you work again?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm the executive director of the Youth Law Center. We're based in California, but we're a national advocacy organization.
And she's a huge fan of Florida Youth Shine, by the way.
Yay, Florida Youth Shine. A lot of our work is in Florida, and we've worked quite a bit with your organization.
Okay, okay.
Well, I think the people are sort of stunned by the profound importance of what you're saying, Jennifer. And I'm not joking. I think that these are really pieces of advice that we need to take into account as we move forward. And so I appreciate you doing it. You've been working, your 20 years of experience sort of moving this work forward as a young person, as an advocate, and now sort of helping all of us. I think this is really important advice. And so we appreciate it. We've taken good notes, so we'll be able to build on some of this.
Sure. If I could say one last thing is that I would encourage for anybody who's interested in, I know this word ombudsman is a weird word, but in California, that office really holds our foster youth rights, and and I'll say a couple of things about the ombudsman's office. Not only did we actually create the office in statute, the other thing we did is because we worked with our leadership, we got permission to actually be the folks that interviewed the person for the job. So we hired the ombudsperson that we wanted for the job. She's still the same person who's in the position now, all these years later, and it was really important. We wanted somebody who knew how to talk to youth. We wanted somebody who was like slightly crazy so that, they would actually understand and kind of vibe with the youth in a particular way. And we wanted somebody who we really trusted was going to listen to the youth and understand why each and every right was so important. And who was kind of fearless and courageous and wasn't going to be scared to challenge providers or caregivers or the state if necessary. And we got that person. We got somebody great. So I would say that's one thing I want to say about the office. But the other thing I'll say is that the other real benefit has been that because we structured the office and we put in there that we put in our state law that the office had to hire former foster youth, it's become a real channel into state jobs and like getting into the civil service. system in California for young people who are in foster care. So we got multiple bangs for our buck with that. And if anybody is interested in sort of looking at the Foster Care Ombudsman's Office, they do have a website that is the California, it's fosteryouthrights.org. And so I can give that to Matt and he can send it out to everybody out there so you can take a look. It contains our Bill of Rights. It contains the statute that enacted both the Ombudsman's Office and California's Foster Care Bill of Rights. And I know our Ombudsman would be happy, thrilled actually, because she loves youth, to talk with any of you who are out there in the States to tell you about her lessons learned. I know she has a lot of ideas. If she could do things over and rewrite her statute to give her a little bit more independence and authority, she would. So she'd love to talk with any of you who are considering a similar model.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're going to make sure that information is included in the notes. Yeah.
I have a, can I say something real quick?
Yes, please.
Jennifer, I like the last thing you were saying. It's really smart. And about the training, do the social worker and the foster parents and then do they do it together in the CASA workers, or is the social workers and the foster parents and CASA workers, or is it separate in the lawyers?
So in California, we're a really big state. And so we've tended to do trainings however we can get people. So ideally, I think it's best to have all the different parties in a room together, getting the same information and hearing the same answers. And so that's been the preferred method, but we've ended up sometimes, my first job was as a student assistant with the Foster Care Ombudsman's Office. And so I know some of the most important trainings that we did were us walking into a group home and just doing a training right there on site for the youth that live there and for the staff people to make sure they really got it and they understood. So I would say ideally it would be the first thing you mentioned, everybody together, but you just kind of have to do it as you can, as things come up.
So
but I will say the one really important thing about the trainings is that the trainings, they have to be led by former foster youth, because it has to be youth who can really deliver the scenarios and explain why the rights are important, and who can give the right answers because you've lived it. So I mean that was definitely something we learned. They're never as powerful if it's not youth delivering them.
Hey, Jennifer, thank you so much for your advice. I wanted to acknowledge that we're actually 5 minutes over, and everybody's still on, so that's really wonderful. We do want to respect everybody's time and wrap up.